Hi everyone, Michelle here from michellesmidheaven.com, and today I want to talk about the shift of the lunar nodes to the Leo Aquarius axis. I'll explain how I interpret the lunar cross, which is the lunar nodes, and then the bendings squaring the nodes. And I'm going to focus primarily on some of the ways in which Jupiter in Leo will interact with the South Node. But first of all, there are two different ways that our astrology software offers to calculate the nodes. So if you use the mean nodes, the shift to Leo Aquarius happens on August 18th, staying there until March 7th, 2028, when the nodes move on to the Cancer Capricorn axis. Remember the lunar nodes, which are the places where the moon's path intersects with the sun's path from our perspective on Earth, they always move backwards through the zodiac. Now, if you prefer using the true nodes, then the shift to Leo Aquarius already happened on July 26th, and the true nodes will stay there until March 26th of 2028. Today, I'm not going to get into a whole discussion about which method is the right method. Pick whatever calculation feels right to you, because you know what? I don't think the universe will stop talking to you, giving you the silent treatment for choosing the calculation of the mean nodes instead of the true nodes, or for preferring one house system over the other. I don't think that's how astrology works. The message will get through, and you'll see what you need to see no matter what. But that's a more philosophical discussion maybe for another time. Today, I really want to focus on the shift of the lunar cross, and as I said, particularly Jupiter's co-presence with the South Node. You could say that the entire solid or fixed cross in our natal chart, so the signs of Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, are now going to be more open to change. And that can be quite unsettling for any planets that we have there, because fixed planets typically don't welcome drastic changes. And yet, that's what the lunar cross, the lunar nodes and bendings, change is what the lunar cross is all about. Think of it as a field, a magnetic field, if you will, that attracts heightened emotional drama. The nodes and bendings are important areas of the moon's path through the sky. And anything lunar, anything that has to do with the moon, affects our emotional landscape, the emotions that are stored in the body, right? So the lunar cross affects us on an emotional level, and we're going to respond to that, each in our unique ways, and not always in a very conscious, controlled way, because we all build up plenty of coping mechanisms to deal with our emotions. And we've all been doing this since forever. Emotions can be very destabilizing in a world that honestly doesn't allow us to deeply explore that side of us, or at least not in a healthy way. So we have all built our own unique defense strategies against these unwanted or socially inconvenient inner tides. Some of us have become really skilled at suppressing emotions, keeping them all nicely bottled up until the bottle starts cracking, of course. Some people cope by finding language for all their inner turmoil, translating all those emotions into words, which is very nice until overanalysis starts driving them crazy. Others might use their sense of humor, but while they make other people laugh, their own loneliness may grow. All of these strategies play an important role, and they try to protect us from any further emotional wounds, but they can also very much clutter our perception. And in that sense, it's often hard for us to see what's truly going on in that area of our natal chart. So if you look at your personal lunar cross in your natal chart, so where the nodes and bendings are, you'll find out where your emotional gravitational field is. And those are the places where you might be more likely to build coping mechanisms. I go really deep into this material in a 2 hour and a half long pre-recorded class I offer on the lunar cross, eclipses, and the Saros cycle, by the way. And I'll leave a link below if you're interested. All right, now this dramatic cross, so to speak, is now moving to the fixed signs. And if you natally have the nodes in the fixed signs, no matter where exactly they are, that natal fixed cross is going to be activated. So this change is definitely going to catalyze more activity in your life in general. But even if your nodes are not in fixed signs, if you happen to have planets in the fixed signs, they're going to go through some exciting changes as well. But the lunar cross is not going to be activated all the time. Again, the nodal axis and the bendings are like a field. They're not the actors. The planets are the actors. And when there are planets moving into that lunar field of change, that's when things start happening. And this is why I want to focus mostly on the planets involved, because that's where the most interesting things are going to take place. Which planets are currently spending a long time in the fixed signs? Jupiter and Pluto. So they're going to encounter that lunar field. And I want to zoom in on Jupiter and the South Node in Leo today because we're in for a special treat this time. Jupiter conjoins the South Node roughly every 6 to 8 years, and usually it's limited to just the one conjunction. They cross paths and then they move on, but not this time. We're being offered a series of 3 Jupiter South Node conjunctions in the same sign. And that's a once in a lifetime offer. The last time we got 3 conjunctions in one sequence was around 1968, 1969, but the first conjunction occurred in Libra while the other two happened in Virgo. If we want to find 3 conjunctions in the same sign, we'd have to go all the way back to 1911 when Jupiter conjoined the South Node 3 times in Scorpio. So we're in for a pretty rare treat that's not going to repeat itself until 2084, when probably for most of us, it's going to be our kids and grandkids who will experience 3 Jupiter South Node conjunctions in the sign of Cancer. Now, we don't need to wait for these exact conjunctions between Jupiter and the South Node to notice the impact. For example, when planets connect with Jupiter, or when the moon comes along for a visit through Leo every month, we may already feel the influence of the South Node there. But as Jupiter gets closer to the South Node, it's definitely going to intensify. The first conjunction happens on November 11th, and the other two occur on March 1st and April 20th of next year. Well, let's see how that combination might express itself. And for that, I like to start with finding out what Jupiter has in common with the South Node. Well, first of all, I think they both relate to invisible realities. Jupiter reaches for meaning, the spiritual implications that stretch beyond what is perceivable, while the South Node is a place where the perceivable literally vanishes. And in a time of loss, we find out what remains. And usually, that's spiritually significant, and it's offering maturity and wisdom. What we took for granted falls away, drops out of the picture, but what we're left with may offer something much more meaningful. When Jupiter gets drawn into the South Node's field, his wholeness might break, which means that your comforting, unified set of beliefs or the framework that carries your way of being, your life philosophy, may completely disintegrate. And that can change your entire spiritual life. This is not because of new insight or because you're choosing to make some adjustments. It's because something happens that relieves you from an attachment. Again, this occurs on the lunar cross, which means that it's a very emotive, soul-stirring, gripping process. It goes much deeper than surface level events. And in that sense, it truly is life-altering stuff that's going on here, provided that we do the Jupiterian thing and surrender to the process. Jupiter's South Node in Leo is about finding out that surrender, paradoxically, is not about giving up your autonomy and becoming fate's servant or whatever. It's about freeing yourself from the tyranny that you have built against yourself. It's about breaking the shackles of your own fears and illusions and all of the defense mechanisms that you have built for yourself to conquer those fears. We all have countless little tyrants running around within. Jupiterian ideals can become tyrants. But as always, the problem already contains the solution. And when you notice what kind of inner turmoil is going on, with the help of the South Node, you might experience Jupiterian freedom, which is not a freedom that makes you restless because you're free to choose between different paths. It's a freedom that means you're becoming undivided. Instead of having the burden of having to choose a path, you simply know which path is yours. You experience it. No big explanations needed. The abundance of Jupiter becomes spiritual simplicity with the South Node. So I think the Jupiter-South Node combination can actually accelerate spiritual growth, but it's going to happen through a process where there is some kind of loss involved. We have to think of loss in the broadest sense. It can simply be about letting go of the illusion that broadcasting our Jupiterian enlightenment and sageness is ever going to convince anyone. I want to go deeper into that here because we think of Jupiter as the god of big ideologies, religions, education, and so forth. But there's a very important underlying pattern or motivation, rather. What is ideology and organized religion? It's groupthink. You know what? I don't think that it's the content itself of the framework of ideas or the actual contents of the teachings that are important for Jupiter. People tend to get focused on the content so much and fight each other about it that they're completely missing the point, which is the format. What's important about Jupiterian doctrines is that they bring people together. You know how Jupiter is the exaltation ruler of the moon sign of Cancer, right? The moon in Cancer represents the masses. Jupiter also finds his joy in the 11th house of community. That's where Jupiter thrives. Ideology and religion are strategies to bring people together, to let people belong somewhere. That's the real attraction. And as everything is cyclical, a problem does not only contain its solution, a solution also contains its own destruction. Dogma carries its own corruption. The South Node could definitely strip us from the illusion that some ideals are not corruptible or from the illusion that we truly belong to a community. Nothing is too sacred, nothing is too precious in the field of the South Node. Suddenly you may realize that you were a slave to groupthink, for example, and that you don't actually belong with the people you thought were your supportive friends. Planets with a South Node sooner or later help us accept that everything is transient and that we too have to move on and distance ourselves from certain situations or from the past. All the exploring that Jupiter enjoys doing is bound to turn inward with the South Node, and simply staying with it can offer and strengthen inner peace, bringing your attention to your inner indestructible spark, the sun's spark, as the sun rules Leo. All right, those were some of my initial thoughts on that. And if you enjoyed this content or format, consider giving this video a thumbs up, and also get in touch with me if you want some personal guidance. I'd love to meet you. You know where to find me, michellesmidheaven.com. Have a beautiful week. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.